Welcome back to the Stepping Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Thomas Keenan, your host, hanging out at the home office here today. And I've got my man, we call him Fritz, but he is known as Michael Fritzius. And we connected, it's got to be 2 months ago at this point. Something happened. I saw some stuff popping off on Facebook, and all of a sudden we're in a DM and we're kind of shooting the shit. And then we wind up on a call, and we hung out on a call and talked for a good hour, if not more. Mm-hmm. And we had a really good, genuine connection. And I was like, hey, man, like, you're in the podcast space. And we'll talk about what your company does, Podcastify Me, here in a minute. And I think people can kind of get a hint with the name, I would hope. But like, hey, you're in the podcast space. Why don't you get on the podcast? We'll talk life. We'll talk business. We'll talk all those cool things in between and just have a really good, open, authentic, and direct conversation. And here you are, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm at the home office too. I have a door and stuff. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So, we connected a few weeks ago about podcasts and something along those lines. And we've, bounced back and forth a couple of times here. You sent me an email today and you asked questions about, a mobile podcast studio. And I've got someone in my circle who specializes in building some of that stuff. But I want to kind of dive back here a little bit because this is not your first venture in business. If I recall correctly, this is your second or third.
Yep.
I'm in the same boat as you. I've got more than I can count, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. All right. Just be real. Yep. And so what was the draw? What got you into business? What was the first thing that was like, this is the thing to do?
I don't know into it, never and on being a business owner in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But when I had the chance to cook up an idea about starting a tech company, doing the same thing I was doing with the software testing, the automation, nerd stuff. And I was given the advice, hey, why don't you just open up an LLC? You get tax write-offs. You can write off business expenses. I'm like, stellar idea. And what ended up happening was I had all of the information up on the Secretary of State website. And I thought, what if I filled in the form wrong? What if there's something and the government's going to kick my door in and charge me $10,000 or something? And then soon after that, the contract that I was under at a telecom company went bye-bye. They gave me like a month's notice. They liked me. They didn't just show up with a box and they're like, see ya. But I got my walk-in papers. And that same evening, I went home and I hit the button and I became a business. And I did fear, but it was, did it cut out there for a second?
Yeah, we're okay though.
All right, we're good.
Yeah, we're just so you know, we're recording locally. So by the time we put this together, no one will know.
Awesome. Very cool. I'll just keep on going then.
Cool.
There was this excited fear that comes with it where, hey, I thought, how hard could it be? And I did a client really soon after I got ready to get out of one position. And it was just, a stream of people coming in. I got work for you. And it got challenging in a hurry, but I realized I had to become a different kind of person in order to be a successful business owner. So it's not my first foray. I've shut that chapter of my life. It closed down 2 years ago, but I'm looking forward now. There's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, love it. So, all right, cool. You did business. You've done it before. What was the allure? What was the draw to get into the podcast space?
Well, one of the services that I added to the tech company, because it was an automation focused company, we did a lot of business process automation in 2020, 2021 timeframe. Because of COVID, there were a lot of challenges with that. The kind of thing that we were doing was more of a luxury. People didn't care about making sure that their software tests were automated. They were just like, we just got to get it out the door and keep the lights on, because I don't even know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. So software testing QA kind of got put off to the wayside. Like, we can't afford that right now. So I was just stapling services onto that last company like nobody's business. And one of them was related to podcasting. And I marketed it as automated podcasting. And people didn't really care about the how so much. They cared more about the what when they started saying, you do podcasting too? Like, tell me about that. And I started getting a few clients here and there, but it wasn't like a serious thing. And I remember having a coffee with a good friend of mine who's got a successful multi-million-dollar company in the tech space, and he's doing websites and ads and stuff like that. And I said, I wonder what would happen if I took that service out and pulled it out into its own thing and called it Podcastify Me. And as soon as I verbalized that, there was this weightiness that hit
Mm.
the table because we were sitting at a Panera when I said this, and we both just looked at each other like,
What are
I
you
said,
waiting
hang
for?
on. Yeah, right. I said, hang on, let me check something out real quick. So I whipped out my phone and I got on Namecheap and I
Yeah.
said, okay, the domain's available for 15 bucks. I'm like, Mark, don't buy this out from under me. Let me have this. He's like, take it. I'm not going to do anything. He's like, just go. So
Yeah.
as soon as I got home, I smashed that buy. It's 15 bucks, man.
Yeah.
So I smashed the button and I sent him a screenshot and I'm like, boom, baby. He's like, oh, I love it. So that's really what launched me into that. It was just, I spent years trying to be all things to all people in the
Mhm.
tech space, software testing, doing websites, social media, ads, all the stuff, all of it. And I
Mhm.
was just blah, 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 spread out
Mhm.
everywhere. And it's like, what if I just take one thing and go deep into it? What would happen? And it
Yeah.
felt like such a relief. Like there was so much stuff. Like I still had the automation in my head. I know
Mhm.
how to do it. I still sling code, but that's not what I'm paid to do. Like it's a
Yeah.
tool in my toolbox. It's not a craft that I employ. So
Yeah.
yeah, just
So
getting out from under my own
now
weight. Yeah.
my assumption here is this: the last business experience, the automation, the process development, I'll call it, the digital marketing basics that any company needs. You've now taken that skill set that you have, and now it's focused exclusively on Podcastify Me. So if you would be willing to kind of, pull back the layers of the onion to see behind the scenes of the business, if you can explain it to us, how has that helped you develop the processes in Podcastify Me, and how are your clients seeing the benefit from that?
Well, I'll share first a weakness that I seem to have. And I noticed that early on in being a consultant. So this is prior to me starting a business, but I wasn't like a W-2 employee anywhere. I was like on the fence. I hadn't decided yet. What I realized was I've got a problem with being forgetful. Like I would write chunks of code and then I would forget where I put them on the computer. And so I had to develop systems, right? It's like I wasn't even in my 40s yet, and I'm already, pooping the bed here.
Yeah.
And I had to develop systems to make sure I knew where to find stuff. I had to organize and come up with my own system to categorize things, put them in folders, and I'm like, okay, I know where I put this because I've named these things appropriately, right? So that's some foreshadowing.
Mhm.
Fast forward to now, what that means is if there's any risk at all that I'm going to forget something, if there's any risk at all that I'm going to procrastinate, or if I'm not going to be able to communicate effectively with my team, I'm going to make a process about it. I'm going to
Mhm.
automate it as much as I can, delegate the rest, and
Mhm.
free up as much time as possible. Because looking back, the reason why my brain wasn't working quite right is because I was trying to do too many things. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize, like, oh, if you do too many things, your brain like goes on
Breaks.
the fritz.
Yes, it does.
It breaks. It's like boom, it just pops out and says, I'm going on vacation. When you figure out
Yeah.
your stuff, then let me know. But I'm out for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
So what it looks like on the surface when we expose our processes to our clients, like we don't want to overburden them with how the sausage is made. We'll
Mhm.
show them a little bit of it just so that they know where our focus is, but our focus is on how do we use a podcast to generate awesome relationships with people. The next step isn't, hey, I want to get a bunch of listeners and be the next Joe Rogan. It's like, well, let's have the next step be they join your Facebook community or they
Mhm.
sign up for your mailing list
Mhm.
or they purchase a workshop or get a book or join, buy a masterclass or course or something like that. Like, what are some ways that we can get them into the ecosystem and then transition them up the value stack? That's how we operate. And
Mhm.
so when we're engaging with our client, it's all about communication, making sure that we've got the right tone, the right flow, the right timbre, everything to make them look and sound the best possible. But yeah, there's a lot of automation and nerdy software stuff under the hood. It's like
Mhm.
you don't want to share that stuff with people. Just not it's not secret sauce. It's just
Sure.
it's gross, man.
Yeah, it takes a very special version of a nerd to want to go back and see what that special sauce looks like and how it connects and makes things happen.
Yep.
I'm definitely one of the weirdos, but I'm also the guy who wakes up on a Saturday and turns on YouTube and watches high level videos. Like,
Yeah. Oh man, workflows for the win. I just sent a screenshot of a workflow for a networking group that I run meetings every month, and they were
Hmm.
screenshot. So use
there we are.
there we are.
So I caught some of that. Our connection is not great today, but let's roll with it. Workflows are great. And I'm not using an agency anymore to produce my show. And I know that's what you do. I've been around the block long enough where I saw some of the good things and I was able to pick pieces of other people's systems and basically say, oh, let me adopt those because I like the way that works. But at the same point in time, what can I modify here to make work with the way that we operate and do business here at Step It Up? And High Level has been a valuable tool for me in conjunction with two other, actually three other software platforms. We'll call it email, right? And I'm not saying automated emails at a high level. Yes, we do use those, but we're doing some manual stuff in Gmail as well. We're using ClickUp for task management, and we're using the crap out of Google Drive folders to keep everything organized.
Yep.
Right. So when somebody applies to come on the podcast, which, you know, you're sitting in the seat here, so you've been through the process. There's a long form, and it's a long form intentionally because we are attempting to filter out the people who don't deserve to be here.
That's right. Got to weed out the yahoos, bro. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, because listen, not everyone is worthwhile having a conversation with when it comes to podcasting. Everyone wants to be the guest, but not everyone is really, let's just call it what it is. Not everyone's ready to have the conversation.
Right.
Or present themselves on a public platform like this. So the form gets filled out and it triggers a whole bunch of things workflow wise. It triggers things inside of ClickUp for my team to go in and test, to go do, create folders, create forms. It does send some automated emails off like, hey, either you've been approved or you haven't been approved for the show. So those kind of things have been really beneficial for me. And I don't know what your experience is with this. I'm going to give you my take on it because I'm not the podcast expert. I've been doing this for a couple of years, but I'm not the podcast expert. I found that as a podcast host, once you get past, we'll call it 50, 60, maybe 100 episodes in the bank recorded and published, all of a sudden, every podcast booking agency under the sun has your contact info. And now you're getting pinged a couple of times a week like, hey, I think that they're pretty cheesy. Hey,
Yeah.
This is Joe Smith, and just listen to your amazing episode with Fritz. You guys talked about some really cool things. And the part that really struck me the most was when you talked about insert bullshit line here.
Isn't it great when they leave that in there too?
Yes.
The little, and it's like, what the heck, man?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, would you be interested in having, you know, this 2-time best-selling author guy who ran $100 billion business on as a guest? And like, for the longest time, it was like, man, I don't have time to deal with this. I don't want to sift through this and look at this person's app, you know, their speaker sheet. So, and I also had a really big network of people that I was able to pull from for a number of years to bring on as high quality guests. Well, after a while, you start running through your network of people that you consider worthy of being on the show. It's like, well, shit, I kind of run out of things to say myself, so I got to bring some guests on here and there, right? And now we've got to put a system in place because I've got all of these people who are saying, hey, I want to be on your show, but how do I filter them out appropriately? And that's where this whole thing came into play. You may have faced this, maybe your clients face this. I'm guilty of this, and I hate that I'm about to admit this. I do really good for a while, and I will get a bunch of shows in the bank, recorded, ready to go, so the team has time to produce them and get them kicked out. And then life happens. And it's like, oh, hey, it's Tuesday afternoon. The show goes live on Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Boss, you got something for us? Like, we need some content. And it's like, oh, shit. So I got real tired of getting into that state too. And it was like, oh, I either got to go and record a solo episode last minute and talk about, I don't know, whatever the hell I can think of at the moment, or how do we leverage and utilize these people who are attempting to connect with us? Right. And for me, it was let's build this podcast application system. Let's filter them out. Let's have them apply. Oh, and by the way, every time someone applies, they're getting added as a lead to the CRM, which means that
Yep.
we can market to them elsewhere too, because they're checking a little box that says I consent to receive email and SMS marketing from so and so company.
Yep.
Awesome. You're mine now. Thank you.
You're in my
Yeah.
awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So
what's it look like for your clients? Because look, not everyone's going to be as wild and nerdy as me when it comes to building processes. From a managerial or a production standpoint, you've got to keep it simple for the podcast host that you're working with. What are some of the basic systems that everyone needs in place when it comes to producing a podcast, even if they're not going to come and work with you in your company at Podcastify Me?
Man, I lost every fifth word. What was the question again?
Oh, no.
I was like, oh man, I'm trying to listen.
When clients come to work with you at the company at Podcastify Me, or even if they're not, if someone is starting a podcast tomorrow and they're going to go out there and they want to handle a lot of it on their own, what are some of the basic systems that they have to have in place if they're going to succeed at it?
Yeah, I think at the base level, they probably should have Trello just to do project management. It's
Mhm.
kind of like ClickUp, but it's really it's more of a project management tool. It's easy to use. It's pretty intuitive,
Yeah.
but that'll help keep them from going insane. And it's got the ability you can email information directly into Trello so that it pops up on as a card. So if you use something as simple as even a Google form, you could
Yeah.
wire it up to say, "Hey, fill this out," and that's how you apply.
Mhm.
But the thing you said before is about how do you keep finding guests? Like when you've burned through your network, you need to have access to people that are outside your scope.
Mm.
One of the things that we always recommend is, hey, this podcast that you've got, you probably realize this, but we're developing like a little bromance here. We're building a relationship together, right?
Mm.
So you're experiencing me, I'm experiencing you. I can already tell, spoiler alert, this is going to be an awesome episode. So at the end of the episode, if you ask that guest, hey, who else do you know that's like you that you think would be a good fit for this show? For two
Mm.
reasons. One, you know yourself pretty good. You know
Yeah.
what your profile is. You likely hang around people that are similar to you, but you just experienced the show. So you know what they would get out of it. Who would you recommend?
Mhm.
So it really helps. And I mean, it's an amazing networking tool, but that's one of the most common bottlenecks. You get going and you get like 25, 30, 40 episodes in, and it's like, oh,
Mm.
I don't have any more people. Oh my goodness. It's like, well, there's 9 billion humans on the planet, last I heard.
Mhm.
I think there's probably a few. It's just that you don't know them yet. So how do
Yeah.
you get access to them? The people that you just
Mhm.
had on.
Yeah, agreed. And there's lots of other organic marketing techniques I think people can leverage and use. We have this thing called social media. My experience, social media is not very fond of the word podcast or you mentioning podcasts so often because they'll actually bury your content.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen that. Like if I put up a screenshot of a podcast recording and I mentioned just recorded a banger episode with Fritz on the podcast last week, they will not display that social media post as prominently as some of my other content.
Hmm.
However, it doesn't mean that people don't see it, right? It still goes out there. You're still telling the world that, hey, I do this and I've been doing it for 5 years now, right? And I've landed hundreds, if not more than that, of guests, of people who've come on and recorded here with me because of social media. Like you're a shining example of that. We found out, we talked about something, we ended up in DMs and boom, all of a sudden, cool, you're on a guest. Which I think is cool. So I think it's a tool that other people can leverage and leverage well if they're going to utilize it properly.
Right.
What are some of the basics when it comes to podcasting that people definitely overcomplicate, from your opinion?
They overcomplicate the look and feel of it. Now, I'm going to say this. I love setting up spaces to make you sound excellent. Like I want you
Mhm.
to look excellent. I want you to sound excellent as much as possible. We'll make sure that the guest is the same way. Like if your lighting is good, we don't want them in a closet or something
Yeah.
unless that's part of their thing. But there's such a thing as a point of diminishing returns. Like you
Mhm.
don't have to remove all the reverb from the room. You don't have to make it sound like you're in a complete soundproof booth. People that are listening are not going to be that critical. Maybe a scant few will, but
Mhm.
are you really worried about their opinion of all people? It's like I'd rather connect with the 99.99% of people that are getting a lot out of the episode because we're talking about some cool stuff, right? So if you hear a police siren or if one of our daughters comes barging in like a boss, even though I've got the on the air sign out there, like, that's life. Life happens.
Mhm.
Um, but just like trying to get that last 0.001%, being a perfectionist is like that. It's like you can get there, but
Mhm.
you could probably talk with 10 awesome people and boost your network in that same amount of time. So
Exactly.
yeah, go for the episodes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I find that it's better to be real. And like we've had some technical difficulties on this show already. It is what it is. It's the internet. You and I don't control that,
Right.
right? So it is what it is. Roll with it. And I find that when you are willing to kind of let your guard down and show the real you, mistakes and all, it just shows others that you are a real, genuine human being and you can connect at a deeper level. And for me personally, I've seen that across multiple different fronts, business and personal.
Yep.
So I love it, man.
Me too. That's
Talk
why I
to me
keep doing
about
it.
talk to me about what does it look like to fire up a podcast and start working with your team? Like, what do you have different packages? Are there different price points? What does that look like for someone who's like, man, I've been on the edge wanting to do this whole podcast thing for a while now. I just don't know where to get started. And now all of a sudden, boom, they listen to the episode and Fritz is the man. How do they learn more and what do they need in place? How do they know they're ready to come to you and set up that conversation to work?
Well, the first tell of knowing whether you're ready is if you personally are curious about using an old medium in some new ways to get better results for your business. We work exclusively with business owners, a mix of for profit and non for profit, but decision makers at the highest echelons of business that are like, hey, this is a very relationship focused, heart centric thing that we're doing.
Mhm.
People buy from us because they like us. We're not the Walmart and Costco brand of what we're doing, like we're boutique. And the people that like us really resonate with us. And we want to use a podcast to have those relationships happen. We don't have any set packages, everything's
Mhm.
custom. And we do it that way because it is bespoke. Not everybody needs every single thing under the sun. Not everybody has the budget to
Mhm.
afford every single thing under the sun. We just want to see people be successful. So if somebody comes along and they're like, I need to find out if I can get with Fritz. I need to talk with him. I need to talk with his team, at least get the conversation started.
Mhm.
Then head over to the website, podcastify.me, M-E, and at multiple places on there, I learned this from a guy, put multiple calls to action.
Mhm.
There's these big honking can't miss pink buttons that say, see if we're a fit. We want to make sure we're a fit for each other, not we're a fit for you.
Mhm.
You got to be a fit for us too, right? So we'll have a conversation. There's no obligation. And if it turns into something that's like, yeah, let's talk some numbers later on. How much would that cost? Well, that's a different call. We
Yeah.
just want to find out, we just want to learn about you as a person.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I scoped out the website before we hopped on the call here. It's part of my process when I'm getting ready for an episode. And
Yeah.
you're not lying, dude. You got calls to action, and they are big giant pink buttons. Are like, click here and let's schedule that call and have that conversation. But that's exactly what you're supposed to do as a marketer.
Yep. It is. That's the biggest size button that editing tool offers. It's the big. It's like 128 pixels. I'm like extra large, super size me. Boom. Can't
Yeah.
go bigger. Great. Make it pink. There's a
Mhm.
particular shade of pink. The hex code is FF00BA. We call it FUBA. So anytime we're making pages for the site, and our 13-year-old came in one time and she's like, "That's that FUBA color." I'm like, "Yeah, it is. I forgot I told her about that.
Yeah.
This needs more FUBA. It's like cowbell, needs more FUBA."
Only a couple people are going to get that reference, but I love it.
That's right. 80s kids understand. Maybe the younger generation doesn't, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. It's well done. It's well put together, and like I totally get it. And So you're talking nerd too at the same point in time, which I think is fantastic. For those who don't know, when it comes to building landing pages, websites, or any kind of graphic design, there's hex code, and that hex code tells us specifically what the color is that we want to make things on digital pages. And man, before I was able to get the look behind the scenes, I was just this guy who installed car stereos and tracking devices in trucks, and hired one of the first consultants that I worked with in my service-based business. I remember going into his office, and if you remember Infusionsoft back in the day, we were working inside of Infusionsoft, and he was doing some website work for me, and like I had never seen behind the scenes, never knew what WordPress looked like from the back end, like none of it. And like this is all new to me, and we're back there building this stuff, and he's got this little color picker eyedropper Google Chrome plugin, and he's going over to these other places that I've got some digital presence, and he's swiping all this information and he's duplicating it in like record time. Dude, my mind was blown. I was like, how the hell are you doing that? So
you stole my website, man.
Yeah. It's definitely something that if you don't know what it is, and if you're finding yourself doing any kind of landing page work or web page design, graphic design, and like, I don't love doing that stuff, but as a small business owner with a small team, I do find my stuff in that area, in that arena occasionally. And having that tool in my tool belt, right, which is the and there's hundreds, if not thousands of versions of it you can go get these days. But that color picker tool is just super helpful.
It is.
Yeah. Love it, man. Love
it.
Who's the ideal client that works with you? Is it, a business doing, $1 million a year or more, or is it someone who's a solopreneur doing a couple $100,000? Like, who do you want to work with?
Well, who I want to work with, the ideal client now, is directors of mission organizations. So we've pivoted, like we still serve people in the for-profit space, but as far as doing kingdom-based work, like we want to help those mission organizations do it better, faster by using a podcast. Because I had this realization a couple months ago, everything that we do for a for-profit business is all designed around how do you form relationships, how do you get visibility, how do you get that awareness about your business brand. And it's like, well, that applies to missions too. It's like they're trying to generate revenue in the form of financial support from churches and individual contributors. They need people to come alongside and actually get trained and go do the mission work. They need to have churches aware of the mission and not have to just fling missionaries out there and be like, oh, get your own support. It's like, this is a really potent tool. So yeah, that's the ideal. But I mean, we still definitely support for-profit businesses. I mean, if they've got money to spend, that's cool.
Come spend it with me.
That's right. Man, just come on over. We'll make a podcast about it, but it's not going to cost $1 million. So
yeah. What's the typical, we'll call it launch time. So someone comes to you, let's say you get a new client, they hit your pink button on the website, that you guys decide you're a good fit for each other. You put together a package deal. I don't know, whatever your price is. Let's just make up some numbers, like a couple grand a month for your team to do the works for them. From that first conversation, from when they pay their bill, that initial payment, to the first produced episode, how much time is going to pass on average if the client's upholding their end of the bargain?
Right. It's going to be on average 2 to 4 weeks. And so that's going to require, good, effective communication between us and them and vice versa. But they've also got to be able to provide any collateral, any resources, music tracks, graphics, whatever. And also it's going to require a little bit of setup. So it varies. So 2 weeks is if we're starting it from scratch and we're just putting it out there. 4 weeks is more like, hey, I've got a show already and we're trying to get handoff, get login, access credentials, all that stuff, and try to insert into their process and take over from them, which is a little more of a delicate situation. But on average, 2 to 4 weeks, you can have a podcast or hand off the one you've already got.
Yeah. What's it look like from the managerial perspective of the podcast? Okay, cool. Someone signs up with you, they're launched, they're recording episodes. Your team and their team are gelling really well. They're actually giving you the recordings on time so you guys can produce everything, right? Because that's another battle occasionally. But what's it look like from a promotion perspective? And do you guys, I don't want to use the word guarantee, but do you help your clients rank better in the podcast stats?
We don't do it directly, although consistent effort will have you rank higher. So our actual focus is developing good relationships. And I often say, a lot of people come and they say, "Oh, I want to be the next Joe Rogan." It's like, you're probably not going to be the next Joe Rogan. You're
Mhm.
probably not going to get 100,000 downloads a day. There's already a Joe Rogan. He's doing a great job being himself.
Mhm.
But I would much rather have, and when I elucidate it like this, they always agree. I would much rather have 500 engaged people instead of having 100,000 passive listeners, because
Mhm.
you can have somebody listen to your show and they're like, cool story, scroll, and they never take action. But if you have 500 people that are saying, yes, I want to be part of this community. Yes, I want to subscribe to your mailing list. Yes, I want to buy your book or your course or be an ambassador or refer people to you. They're
Mhm.
doing something above and beyond just listening. They're taking action. They're saying, I want more of what you've got. Like, I like you and I want to be around you more and I want to demonstrate that. So
Mhm.
that's what we go for. So we're not really as that's the kind of thing that makes us different as opposed to other podcasting agencies is we're not worried about the ranking. We're not worried
Mhm.
about the number of listeners. I want to see how many people enter into your CRM that later become potential clients, referral partners, strategic
Mhm.
partners, ambassadors. That's where the money is. And you can get that a lot quicker than trying to go the route of listenership and monetization.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And so I'm a published author as well. And I didn't know this when I first started, writing the book, but and you know this too, you're not making money from the book. You're making money from the connections and the doors that the book opens for you, right? You're making
Yep.
money from the podcasting. You're making money from the client who saw you speak at the event, the person who read your book. That's going to become your client, and that's how you get your ROI from the money put forth into the development and the editing and printing and publishing of said book, right? My opinion
Yep.
is the same thing with podcasts. You're not getting your money from the podcast, you're getting money from the result of the podcast and what the podcast did for you. And
Yep.
we I'm just talking my own company here, and what we do a decent job of, because I've also been a podcast guest, and no one ever tells me the show went live. I get no collateral at the end. It was like, okay, great, that was an awesome 30 or 40-minute conversation I had with that person, but right.
Yeah.
So we do the follow up there, well, as like, hey, your episode's live. Here's the links. Here's the Google Drive folder with everything you need, all of the assets we created for the show. Awesome. Where we fall short, and I think this is where your company has expertise, is reminding that person, hey, by the way, these are some of the things that we offer. These are some of the other ways that we can stay connected and work together moving forward. Are you interested?
Yeah. That follow up is key. And so that's not something we do specifically for every single person. Like,
Mhm.
usually the client is the one that takes care of that, because like
Yeah.
we're setting up the opportunity for them to build a relationship together,
Mhm.
but we can follow up with them in different ways. So to your point, what we'll do is, yeah, we'll send them the collateral, we'll send them the clips, the teasers, the micro content, make it as simple as possible for them to share on social. And funny enough, just yesterday I had a conversation with somebody who was saying, "Yeah, we're doing all that stuff and nobody's taking action. Like, we're giving them the shorts, the clips, and they're on like, here's how to do it." And they're like, "Great." And then they don't do it. And it's like,
Mhm.
you were just on the show, man. Don't you want people to hear what you were saying? And I said, well, I wonder if there's a way to incentivize that. Like, he's
Mhm.
got a master class, like a mastermind type thing, a community group that he
Mhm.
monetizes. He sells access to it. And I said, do you think you'd be able to give them a small spiff or like a discount on joining that in exchange for, hey, if you share, I'll give 10% off. I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't
Mhm.
thought of that at all. I said, well, I mean, it's going to break the bank if you can monetize and give them that incentive to take that particular action. Then you end up getting more people aware of your podcast, and then it just snowballs from there. But yeah, you might have to squirt a little bit of money grease in the gears to get things going better. Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. You got my mind spinning here. I'm trying to think of ways that I could do that with my own list and some of the offers that we have. And there's a couple of things come to mind. I've got some online courses that I've created over the years. I've got some. They're not. I don't have anything low ticket. the lowest ticket program that I have is either a $3,000 single payment or you're paying $279 a month. So technically it's not low ticket, but is there a way to either grant someone or give someone access to that program? Or, hey, here's an affiliate link for this. Make sure you send out this affiliate link. And if people sign up through your link,
Yeah.
we're going to give you 10%, 15%, whatever.
Yeah. That's a perfect strategy. And I mean, especially affiliates, like not everybody's cut, but if you can identify like the certain personality profile and you're like, I want more people like that on my show, because then every person you have on, you're giving them an exclusive opportunity to go to bat and be an ambassador for you. And they know people. So it may require kind of an interim step of they need to experience a little bit about what it is that you're doing outside of the podcast realm. But once they've experienced it, and then it's like, all right, now can you go forth and sell on my behalf? Pretty please, we're on top. Then they will, they get money, you get money. It's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Dude, this has been great. I've picked up some tidbits here as well that I'm like, oh God, my brain hurts now. I've got to go do work because of these new ideas and crazy things that are popping in. I appreciate you coming in here with us today.
I didn't mean to make your brain hurt, bro. I didn't come here trying to make your brain hurt, man. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's not hard to make my brain hurt. It's all good.
I come in and say hello and you're like, oh, my face. Oh, yeah.
And more cowbell.
Yep.
Yeah. Tell us, where's the best place to connect?
Yeah, best place to connect. Find me on Facebook. Find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. Not so much, but it's coming. But you can also connect via that big pink button on the website that we were just talking about before. See if we're a fit. I'd love to connect that way. If you're pod curious at all, we'd probably have a conversation. Let's talk.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes too, Michael. Podcastify.me. Connect with Fritz. Yep. He's an awesome dude. He knows what he's doing. Man, I've really enjoyed the conversation here today. I apologize for our technical difficulties, but you know what, man? It's real life, and we got to have some good conversation.
It's all right. Gives the team something to do. Got to keep them sharp.
I'll talk to you later. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Make sure you head over to stepitupentrepreneur.com and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast.